Edwards, Democrat of Maryland, and two fair trade leaders in Congress, the legislative director of the Communication Workers of America, one of the country's largest unions, Shane Larson, and joining us from Washington State, the chair of the Washington State Fair Trade Campaign, the director of the Washington State Fair Trade Campaign, Gillian Locascio, and she is one of the people across the country who's organizing events. I will just summarize before we introduce the members of Congress by saying there are scores of activities going on during this July 4th recess about public concerns in opposition, concerns about in opposition to the old fast-track trade procedure and the TPP. And the big focus on this patriotic holiday is how those procedures and that agreement could undermine the Buy American preferences that are so important to investing our tax dollars back into creating jobs at home. Congresswoman Edwards will talk about her efforts over the last several years to make sure that didn't happen and how so far USTR is continuing to include those kind of provisions in our trade agreements. There are activities in 20 states. There is everything from rallies and news conferences to surprise events at 4th of July parades members of Congress are in. There are events being held with members who are concerned about these agreements, with members who haven't declared a position. It is a lollapalooza of activities. And today, data is being released to every congressional office that specifies the loss to their state if Buy American procurement preferences are waived under TPP. So with no further ado, I would like to introduce Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. Hello? Congresswoman DeLauro, go ahead.
All right, thank you so much, Lori, and thank you all for being on the call today. Much appreciated. First, I really would love to recognize public citizen and the communication workers, all of the activists who are working at a grassroots level and are going to lead the push over the 4th of July weekend. Over the next 10 days, you're going to see advocates who are going to make the case for fair trade against TPP, whether they're at a picnic, a parade, a barbecue, and congressional offices are also participating in this effort all over the country. Well, this is what we know. This proposed NAFTA-style pact, 11 other nations, including Vietnam, by the way, where the minimum wage is 28 cents an hour, is only going to wind up hurting our workers, and it's going to hurt our manufacturers. What is particularly important is the devastation of this to the Buy America policies and provisions that have existed in our law since the New Deal, and in fact support millions of jobs across the country. In the current term of a TPP waives away the Buy American policy. It also mandates that all firms in any TPP country be given the same treatment as U.S. firms in bidding for federal contracts. I don't think you could find a worse idea for American workers and for businesses. The federal procurement market is over 10 times larger than all of the prospective TPP procurement markets combined. Let me put it another way for you. By gutting them, if you gut the Buy America procedures and the provisions in this deal, we trade away preferential access to a $556 billion federal procurement market in order to gain access to just $53 billion in new markets. That loses $10 for the sake of a dollar gain. That doesn't seem to be a good business model. I have been fighting for years to get the Defense Department to Buy American, or at least, at the very least, to stop giving no-bid defense contracts to foreign countries and foreign companies. These efforts in the TPP would take us in the wrong direction. It would have a profound impact on jobs, profound impact on the economy. Taxpayers want to see that their money is working to create jobs here in America, not in sweatshops overseas. And I might add one piece. One of the biggest problems that families are facing today is that jobs are not paying enough. The wages are not high enough for them to have a decent living. That is of real concern to them. And if we move in this direction, not only are we going to see wages drop, and what we've seen in manufacturing is those jobs lost when people go out to get another job and they get another job, it's about 20% less. The biggest problem is stagnant wages, and that is to be ought to be a central piece of our looking at how these trade agreements affect Americans. So 4 out of 5 Americans support Buy American policies. 2/3 oppose the granting the fast-track negotiating authority to the president in order to enact TPP. I've been very proud to lead the fight in the House. Report to the House Democrats, dozens of Republicans have already publicly declared their opposition to fast-track, and I think the opposition will grow after this 4th of July as the word gets out and folks are on the ground and talking about what's proposed in the trade pact. It is a very, very tough economy still for families today. Folks want to see us create those jobs. They want to see that we are looking at ways in which we can increase their wages, and they want to see economic growth restored here at home. So many of them remember firsthand, and they felt firsthand what happened after NAFTA. And we should not blindly endorse any more NAFTA-style deals negotiated behind closed doors, which sell out workers, offshore our manufacturing, and further depress wages and benefits. So we should not simply sign away our Buy American investments in our businesses and our workers, investments that have worked to grow this economy for over 80 years. And I'm thankful and very grateful for the opportunity to participate in this press conference.
Thank you, Congresswoman DeLauro. Congresswoman Edwards will speak next. She was the leader of a letter 2 years ago as the negotiations were underway on TPP warning, that was signed by 70 members of the House, warning the administration not to agree to such provisions. And it's my honor to introduce Congresswoman Donna Edwards from Maryland.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Lori, and thank you also to Public Citizen, to the CWA, and to Gillian also for all of your leadership. You know, I was on the steps of the Capitol with you, Lori, when NAFTA passed, and I remember that day, and remember knowing from you then how bad that would be for the American worker. And here we are, you know, a couple of decades later, and we're revisiting the same thing. And so I feel really strongly that as a member of Congress now, I wasn't then, but as a member of Congress now, we should make sure that we continue to protect America's workers. I mean, for years I've been saying to constituents and to our colleagues that it's not that I'm against trade and in theory against an agreement, but not one that so jeopardizes American workers and American products. And so I want to touch on some of my concerns that I think should be concerns of all Americans. First of all, I'm concerned about the provisions that would limit the availability of affordable access to life-saving medicines. I'm against a provision that would allow human rights violations to continue in Brunei. Now, what we all know is that any agreement that fails to consult with Congress, and I think, frankly, the process that the administration and that we're engaged in now does that, fails to consult with Congress, and then uses a mechanism that essentially delegates Congress's congressional authority over all of our trade policies. And of course, an agreement that doesn't protect at its core workers' rights in Colombia, those are concerning provisions, and provisions that hurt America's economy and the livelihood of American workers. And that includes, and to Rosa's point, the Buy American provision that's been part of American procurement policy and politics since the Great Depression. And there's a good reason for that, because by fortifying and preserving Buy American provisions, that means we're fortifying and preserving American jobs. We're not in a Great Depression today, but our nation is in the midst of the greatest economic recovery that we've seen in 80 years. And so how is it that we could be put in a position of supporting a so-called free trade agreement that hinders American-based companies and American workers at this really precarious economic time? Now, today we have 12 countries and 29 proposed chapters, including one covering government procurement policy and the agreements that are being sought. Now, I agree with the president on a whole bunch of different issues, but on this topic, I think he's going to be making a decision that could actually harm American workers. Congress has established strong domestic procurement preferences that have directly benefited U.S. workers, companies, and our entire nation's economy. And so I'm committed to having an agreement that provides that firms operating in other nations and that get national treatment, giving them access to U.S. government procurement. That completely undermines American workers, undermines American business, and ultimately would undermine the American economy. The reason that we have Buy America provisions and the government procurement policies are no exception, the reason is because we have those provisions in order to strengthen American goods production and American workers. And so when I think about the TPP, I think about how we have to focus on creating jobs and revitalizing the U.S. manufacturing base, and that we have to have trade agreements that don't take away this really important policy tool. And so I want to conclude just by saying that I want to encourage the President to ensure that ultimately this trade pact doesn't limit our rights to spend U.S. tax dollars on U.S. goods and services that support domestic manufacturing. This is the 21st century. The United States has to be in a 21st century economy, and the goal should be to bring up and strengthen all of the world's workers, but not to drill us down to a point where American workers have the least protection and American goods have the least protection around the world. And so we are going to reinvigorate that letter that was successful before. I think we had 70 signatories on that letter, really promoting and supporting Buy American provisions. And we are not going to rest until we make sure that American goods are protected and American workers are protected. And with that, I want to conclude and would love to take questions, but I think that we have vote called a few minutes ago.
Well, I was going to suggest if there are any urgent questions for the members and you guys have time, let's jump queue and have any questions. Reporters, any questions for the members, please identify yourself. Hit star 6
from
Washington. Mute.
Jim Berger from Washington Trade Daily. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. A question for Ms. Edwards. The letter you mentioned that you wrote with some members 2 years ago on Buy America, I guess. Was there any response? And in the meantime, have you got any oral assurances that the existing Buy America laws would be exempted from TPP?
Oh my gosh, why in the world would we get oral assurances when what we need are concrete written assurances from the President and participation by the Congress of the United States to guarantee that Buy America provisions would be preserved? I think the point is, and the reason that we sent that letter 2 years ago and that we are reinvigorating that process, recirculating a letter for signatories, is because we want to make clear to the administration and the President, this is a non-starter. This is, there's no question about this, and I think, seeing those names and those congressional districts that we all represent is the strongest signal possible that we could send to the administration that those provisions would be absolutely unacceptable.
Well, but the fact of the matter is, in the TPP, which is what we know, let alone assurances, but we already know that it waives away the Buy American policy, and it mandates, that's laid out, that all firms in any TPP country be given the same treatment as U.S. firms in bidding for federal contracts. They were already, ignoring what people, the good efforts of Congresswoman Edwards 2 years ago, in addition to the efforts being made today. So it's not a question of assurances. They're going in the wrong direction. That's what we know now.
Jim, USTR has confirmed that there are national treatment provisions for all of the TPP countries for all procurement over a certain threshold. That's a de minimis amount set for either services, construction, or goods, and that they have not been willing to even confirm that the old waivers for things like construction-grade steel that have existed in past agreements have been included. They have admitted, though, that there would have to be a major waiver, and that would include all of the state-owned enterprises in Vietnam, Malaysia, etc. getting national treatment, forced treatment, the same as the United States companies bidding on the contracts.
Well, and Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, but you know what the administration is asking, what the president is asking us to do is do two things. One, fast track an agreement that we have where we haven't seen all the details, and then knowing what some of those details are, waving away, essentially wiping away Congress's authority to make any changes in those provisions to protect American workers and to protect American goods.
Now, the lack of transparency has been unbelievable on this effort, so there are no assurances.
But these usually in negotiations, the United States take at the very end the exception on Buy America, but you don't think that it's going to happen.
No.
We have no assurances. We have no assurances, and the inkling that this is not going to happen.
But also, Jim, there are two different laws. Buy American Act of 33, as expanded to new policies, covers all procurement for all goods going to services contracts, etc. And that one has never been protected. Rather, the U.S. government has issued regulation after regulation for NAFTA, CAFTA, all the countries, waiving Buy American. The only thing that's been waived ever is part of Buy America, which is the construction-grade steel, which is a very small subset that's, for instance, in the infrastructure revolving fund. But all of the cars, all of the construction that's directly federally funded, Buy American is waived. And there's no question of that. USTR admits to that.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, this is
Any
Dave
other
Johnson.
questions?
Yes. Dave Johnson, Campaign for America's Future. Do you find among your colleagues in the House that there is an awareness of the trade deficit and the size of it and what it means to our economy? Are they aware of that?
The members of Congress are aware of the deficit, and we also are aware that the deficit is coming down. It's been halved.
Trade deficit. Trade deficit.
Yes, people are aware of the trade deficit, and they also there is real data that reflects NAFTA, Korea, and a policy on re-exporting that actually increases what that trade deficit is about. And there are many sectors that can be viewed that reflect the continuance of the trade deficit. It's one of the things that we're trying to address in this as well. That the notion that the issue of exports it solves the problem doesn't reflect any view or the statistics that deals with imports, and that's effect on the deficit as well.
So the trade deficit is not down by half. It's actually way up. That was the budget.
Well, no, that's the federal deficit. I didn't say, and the federal deficit. So that was my error. No, the trade deficit is really climbing, and that's as a result of the trade policies that we have as well.
Any further questions for the members?
Yeah, I'm going to go to vote. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, and that is Shane Larson, the Legislative Director for the Communication Workers of America. Many thanks to members of Congress.
Thank you, Lori, and especially thank you to Congresswomen DeLauro and Edwards for their strong leadership on this issue, specifically around Buy America protections in trade agreements, especially their leadership overall on fair trade policies. CWA members around the country are looking forward to joining with our friends at CT, Citizens Trade Campaign and Public Citizen, and other fair trade activists around the country in taking part in events throughout the 4th of July recess to make it clear that as we celebrate our nation's birthday, it's important to know if our elected representatives are standing up for American workers and American jobs and a prudent use of our tax dollars. Here at CWA, members are going to be mobilizing in congressional districts all over the country, like several in Minnesota, throughout New York State, both upstate and in the city, in Sacramento, California, and throughout communities in Texas. Our members know that the Buy American Act, which has been in effect for many, many years, has given U.S. firms a leg up on U.S. government procurement contract for generations And why should we let the TPP and other trade agreements change that and further slash American jobs? Members of Congress say they're looking forward to working with President Obama to fashion fair trade policies that do not endanger American jobs. The House has already passed an amendment on a voice vote to make it clear that trade agreements cannot be used to undermine these provisions. I mean, and you all know that it's very difficult to get a voice vote approval on anything in today's House of Representatives. Like something like this. So the House has made it very clear, and now Congresswoman Edwards and Congressman Walter Jones are leading this bipartisan effort to reiterate that, to have members of Congress reiterate their strong position that these trade agreements cannot undermine these provisions. And it's exactly that kind of question that our members, CWA members and activists around the country, are going to be putting to the Congress members and representatives this 4th of July recess, to make sure that they ask themselves, and the constituents throughout the country are asking them, do they stand for these policies, and will make sure that trade agreements do not become a general race to the bottom, and we see more of what we're seeing right now in Oakland and in San Francisco in the Bay Area with the Bay Bridge, where it's now falling apart because they didn't use Buy America and used Chinese steel, and the bridge is actually falling apart. So those are the kinds of questions our members are going to be challenging members of Congress over the 4th of July recess. We're very engaged. We're very excited to be doing this, and look forward to working with our congressional champions like Congresswoman DeLauro and Edwards to keep making this an issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Gillian, from the Washington Fair Trade Coalition, you actually have a bunch of events going on in Washington State. Welcome.
We do. Thank you very much. The Washington Fair Trade Coalition, just to give a little bit of background, we represent about 68 labor, environmental, faith, student, social justice organizations, fair trade businesses, and cooperatives here in Washington State. And trade is very important to our entire coalition and our state in general. However, we've watched the impacts of about 20 years of NAFTA-style trade agreements on our jobs, our families here in the state, and have really come together to say that we cannot continue with the status quo. So on the week where we're celebrating our independence and our democracy, it's incredibly important that we not overlook one of the greatest threats to working people in this state, and in our trade partners as well. And this is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is being negotiated without their representation and behind closed doors. So to celebrate our democracy this upcoming week, we're going to have a set of actions rolling across the state as part of a set of actions really rolling across the country. Here in Washington State, we'll be having a community forum where we'll have perspectives being shared from those who are working on issues of immigration, in the environmental area, for labor rights, and for the strengthening of our democracy against large quantities of money in the political process. And that will be in Tacoma. And then we'll have a set of rallies, street theater, and letter drops rolling across the congressional districts of Representatives Darren Kilmer, Representative Danny Heck, Representative Adam Smith, Representative Susan Bell Bennett. They've been reluctant to take a public stance on fast track that hasn't been officially put out to a vote yet. And so we're asking them to take a stand for what we would want to see, and to take a stand for democracy and the American people, and not find a way congressional oversight of this secretive agreement. It will have such an impact on the people here in our state.
Thank you very much, Gillian. Just to close, we will be releasing later today all of the state-by-state, the national version of the state-by-state data, which shows state-by-state the loss of Buy America Away to that state by procurement share, from the $1,500 a person in Alabama to the $2,500 in Connecticut to the almost $4,000. Sorry, $2,300 in California to the almost $4,000 in Connecticut. The specific reinvestment into states can be documented in the loss, therefore, if that were waived. Any questions for any of our remaining speakers?
Yeah, just one other. This is Jim Berger again from Washington Trade Daily. the transatlantic trade partnership, the Europeans are suggesting a buy European policy, buy America European policy to replace buy America. You have any comment on that? Or?
The actual European policy is to deepen the waiver. The U.S. already has some national treatment obligations through the World Trade Organization's government procurement agreement with the European Union, and they are calling for lifting the construction-grade steel exception and adding the coverage of all U.S. states, and they've listed 17 specific cities whose procurement they also want covered. So their sort of notion is that they should have a waiver for all the countries all the way down to the U.S. municipal procurement level, and this, as you can imagine, has not been a highly it's not been a position that has found a lot of support in the U.S. If you look on our website, tradewatch.org, you can actually see the list of the 17 cities they're targeting. Anyone else want to add? Any other questions? All right, thank you all very much. There'll be a recording of this call posted very soon. Thank you.